Exit 1. The fixer and the politician. There are two kinds of dangerous people in this world. The kind who want power. And the kind who are sent to take it from someone else. The first kind, you know them. You have seen them your whole life. They show up at podiums and press conferences with their hands out and their promises polished. Their smiles are calibrated to the exact degree of warmth that reads as genuine without actually costing them anything. They want power the way some people want air. Not because they have thought carefully about what they will do with it, but because the wanting is who they are. The second kind are quieter. You do not see them coming. Most of the time you do not see them at all. They are the infrastructure of the first kind. The mechanism behind the machine. The reason certain people rise and certain people disappear. They do not want power. They are power's instrument. And instruments do not ask questions. They do not have doubts. They do not stand at the edge of a political rally on a Tuesday evening in Atlanta, Georgia, and forget what they came to do because a woman at a podium said something that cracked 10 years of silence right open. Except that one did. This is that story. Stay with me. Because this one does not go where you think it is going. The woman at that podium? She already knows he is there. And the man who came to end her campaign? He is about to ask her a question that neither of them will be able to walk away from. Stay with me. Subscribe if you haven't. Now let's begin. There is a version of Atlanta that shows up in magazines. The skyline. The money. The restaurants in Buckhead where the valet parking costs more than some people's groceries. The version of Atlanta that has been carefully constructed for outside consumption. Polished. Ambitious. Photogenic. Sweet Auburn is not that version. Sweet Auburn is the version that was here before the polish. The version that survived things the polished version would prefer not to discuss. Redlining. Urban renewal that was neither urban nor renewal. Decades of being the part of the city that the city's official narrative skipped over on its way to somewhere more presentable. Sweet Auburn built itself from the inside out. With the particular stubbornness of a community that learned not to wait for permission to exist. And tonight, on this Tuesday evening in October, it is alive in a way that the polished version rarely manages. Auburn Avenue is moving. Not the frantic movement of rush hour. Not the scattered movement of people with nowhere specific to be. This is purposeful movement. The movement of people who know exactly where they are going and want to get there. Families come from the direction of the MARTA station. Some have children with them. Kids who have been awake since 6 in the morning. Tired in the way that only school days produce. But still moving. Still upright. Still following the warm glow of string lights visible above the rooflines in the distance. Because some things are worth seeing even when your feet hurt. An elderly couple walks slowly but deliberately. Her arm is through his. Both of them in their good clothes. Not formal. Chosen. There is a difference. A mother pushes a stroller with one hand. In the other hand she carries a homemade sign. Green and gold lettering. Careful. Unhurried. The lettering of someone who sat at a kitchen table the night before and took their time. The sign reads, Adams for all of us. The lot behind the old Auburn Avenue Bread Company has been transformed. String lights hang between the lampposts and the temporary scaffolding. Warm bulbs. Close together. The kind that give everything underneath them a particular quality of light. The kind that make faces look the way faces look when they are at rest. Someone chose those lights deliberately. Someone on Naledi Adams's team understood that the lighting at a political event is not a technical detail. It is a statement about what kind of evening this is going to be. The stage is simple. A podium. 2 speakers on stands. A Georgia flag and an American flag on either side. Behind the podium, a backdrop in deep green and gold. Clean lettering. 4 words. Building something real. Not vote for me. Not together we can. Not the standard currency of political events. Building something real. The folding chairs are filling steadily. Families with small children take the aisle seats. Practical. Children need exits. Toward the back, people who came alone choose seats near others anyway. That says something. About what this event means to this neighborhood. About what kind of room this is becoming. Standing room is already 3 and 4 people deep along the sides. At the east edge of the lot, a food vendor has set up informally. Nobody asked him to leave. Because the smell coming from his setup is doing something good for the atmosphere and everyone in the vicinity knows it. Steam rises from something hot and fragrant. It catches the amber light of the string bulbs above and curls slowly into the October air. Near the front, two women share something from one of his paper containers. They talk with the ease of people who have not seen each other in a while and are glad to have a reason to close the distance. One elderly man sits apart from all of it. His name is Clarence. 71 years old. Former postal worker. He has lived 4 blocks from this lot for 40 years. He has watched this neighborhood absorb more than most neighborhoods are asked to absorb. And remain itself through all of it. He brought his own chair from home. A lawn chair with a built-in cup holder in the right armrest. In the cup holder sits a bottle of sweet tea. He has positioned himself with the specific intentionality of someone who arrived early, chose his spot carefully, and is not going anywhere until the last word is spoken. Clarence has seen politicians come through Sweet Auburn before. Many of them. Some were genuine. Some were very good at performing genuineness. He had developed over 71 years, a reliable internal instrument for telling the difference. He has used that instrument at 3 Naledi Adams events over the past 18 months. His instrument says, "This one is real." He unscrews his sweet tea, takes one measured sip, sets it back in the cup holder, and watches the empty podium. The warm-up speaker, a young council aide named Brandon, is finishing his remarks. He is 26. This is the largest crowd he has ever spoken in front of. His voice is doing something in the upper register that he will be embarrassed about when he watches the video later. But he finishes strong. The applause is warm and genuine. The crowd is in a generous mood. The kind of mood that a well-run event produces when the atmosphere has been correctly set and people have had enough time to settle without having too much time to check their phones. Darius Cole stands to the left of the stage. He is Naledi's campaign manager. 46. Precise. The kind of man who has worked in Atlanta politics long enough to trust almost no one. He chose to trust Naledi Adams 3 years ago with the specific deliberateness of all that experience behind him. He has never had reason to question the choice. He surveys the crowd with professional efficiency. Turnout, strong. Above projection. Energy, genuine. Not manufactured. Media, 2 local cameras positioned correctly. 1 print journalist from the AJC. Security, 2 visible staff at the front corners. Marcus in plain clothes working the standing section. Perimeter holding. He is 3/4 through his survey when something stops him. Not something visible exactly. An absence. A gap in the way the room reads. His eye moves to the side corridor between the scaffolding and the bread company's exterior wall. There is someone there. Large. Dark jacket. Standing with his back to the wall. Not moving. Not engaging with anything around him. Not a community member. The body language is wrong. Too contained. Too deliberate. The stance of someone who has chosen that position for a reason rather than drifted into it. Not press either. The press are all in their designated area to the right of the stage. Darius looks at the man for 4 seconds. Then Brandon steps away from the podium. The crowd shifts forward. Darius's attention shifts with it. Because Naledi is about to walk out. And that is the moment that requires everything he has. The crowd feels her before they see her. This is not mysticism. It is what happens when 400 people oriented toward a single point receive the information that what they have been waiting for is about to arrive. A shift in collective posture. A collective intake, not quite breath, more like attention, that moves through the room in less than a second. Naledi Adams walks out from the left side of the stage at 6:47 p.m. She walks at her own pace. Not slowly. Not with manufactured gravity. The pace of a woman who knows exactly where she is going and has already decided what she will do when she gets there. She reaches the podium. She does not begin immediately. She looks at the crowd. Not scanning. Not performing the pause. Actually looking. The way she has learned to look. From years of standing in rooms where she needed to understand what was actually in front of her before she opened her mouth. She sees Gloria in the 3rd row. Who comes to every event. Always the same seat. She sees the young women near the back with the handmade button. She sees Clarence in his lawn chair. Watching her with the patient assessment of a man who has been taking the measure of people for 7 decades. Who has already made his decision. But is willing to have it confirmed. She touches the left earring. Once. Briefly. A reflex so automatic she is no longer fully aware of it. Then she smiles. Not the campaign smile. The other one. The one that starts in her eyes before it reaches her mouth. The smile of someone who has survived something and is genuinely glad to be on this side of it. The crowd responds the way crowds respond to things that are real. And Naledi Adams begins to speak. She did not always walk into rooms the way she walks into them now. There was a time when she entered rooms the way people enter rooms when they are not sure they are supposed to be there. Shoulders carrying tension. Eyes checking exits before faces. The particular posture of someone who has already decided, before the door opens, that they may be asked to leave. That version of Naledi Adams arrived in Atlanta 7 years ago. 2 suitcases. A carry-on bag. And the specific kind of exhaustion that does not come from a long flight. The kind that comes from a long time. She was 38 years old. She had been married for 9 years. His name was Thomas Martin. A Johannesburg architect. Well regarded in his profession. The kind of man who was charming in public and a different kind of man entirely once the door closed. He did not hit her. She wants to be clear about that when she tells this story. Because people hear he was a different man behind closed doors and they assume the worst kind of different. Thomas Martin was not that. He was a quieter kind of different. The kind that leaves no marks. It started the way these things always start. Gradually. So gradually that by the time she understood what was happening, it had already been happening for years. He did not like her friends. Not loudly. Not with arguments or ultimatums. He simply made his discomfort known in small, consistent ways. A sigh when she mentioned certain names. A comment delivered lightly about whether a particular friendship was really worth her energy. A raised eyebrow held a half-second too long. She started seeing her friends less. Then her cousins. Then the aunt she had been close to since childhood. Then her colleagues from the firm where she had worked before the marriage. The job she had left because Thomas felt it was beneath what she could be doing, and she had believed him because in those early years she believed most things he said. She did not notice the isolation while it was happening. That is the thing about that kind of removal. It does not feel like removal. Feels like simplification. Like you are becoming more focused. More present in your marriage. More committed. It is only later, much later, that you look up and realize the people who knew you before him are gone. And the person left in the room is someone he designed. He did not want her to work. Not at first. In the beginning it was framed as generosity. You don't need to. I earn enough for both of us. Why should you carry that stress? Sounded like care. She received it as care. But the years passed. And when she began to feel the walls of the house as walls, when she began to understand that a life without work of her own was a life without ground to stand on, she tried. He had an idea. A small import business. Community-focused. Food supply. The seed of something she could feel was real. She put it in front of Thomas. He looked at it the way a teacher looks at a student's work when the student has tried hard but missed the point entirely. It needs more development, he said. She developed it. He came back with more. The timing isn't right. She waited. She came back again. Naledi. I just don't think this is you. She filed it away. Told herself he was probably right. That she was probably not ready. That she should wait until she was more certain. 2 years later she discovered, through a mutual colleague accidentally, the way truths surface when they have been buried too long, that Thomas had called 3 of her potential investors privately. Had told them, calmly and with apparent concern, that he was not confident in her judgment. That he did not think the venture was sound. That he cared about them too much to watch them put money into something that would not work. He had done this quietly. Carefully. Without a single conversation with her. She sat with that information for 3 days. And then there was the other woman. She found out the way these things are always found out. Not dramatically. Not with a confrontation or a confession. A message on a phone left unlocked on a kitchen counter. Ordinary carelessness producing extraordinary damage. She read it once. Put the phone back exactly where she found it. Went to their bedroom. Sat on the edge of the bed. And waited for the heartbreak to arrive. It arrived. But it was smaller than she expected. What was larger, what surprised her completely, was the relief. She sat on the edge of the bed in her house in Johannesburg and felt relief washing through her like cool water. And the relief frightened her more than the betrayal did. Because it told her something she had not been willing to say directly. That she had been surviving this marriage. Not living inside it. Surviving it. For a long time. She did not confront him that night. She waited. She thought. She called Dr. Patel, the therapist she had been seeing quietly for 8 months, the small, precise woman who had first given her language for what she had been experiencing. The woman who had said in an ordinary session about 40 minutes in, "Naledi, do you notice that you just spent 12 minutes explaining why his feelings were valid and approximately 30 seconds on your own?" She had noticed. She had started noticing a great many things after that. Dr. Patel listened to everything. Then she asked one question. "What do you want?" Not what are you going to do? Not what does he deserve? Not what will people think? What do you want? Naledi was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want to build something." She told Thomas 2 weeks later. He did not take it well. Not with violence, she wants to be clear about that too. With the specific surgical cruelty of a man who has decided that if he cannot keep something, he will make the leaving as costly as possible. The divorce took 2 years. He contested everything he could contest. He used money the way certain men use money, not to live well but to make leaving expensive. Their shared friends sorted themselves along the lines of who had more to offer going forward. She lost some people she had thought were hers. But she had stopped being surprised by what belonged to her and what had only been on loan. There was one last conversation. Near the end. When the legal process had ground through most of what it needed to grind through and the ending was visible if not yet final. She had brought something to show him. Not to convince him. Not to ask permission. She was done asking permission. She brought it because she wanted him to see who she was becoming. She did not know exactly why she wanted that. Perhaps it was the last of something. Perhaps it was the closing of a door that needed to be seen closing. It was the plan. The full plan. The business framework that would eventually become the fish market. The supermarkets. The life she was going to build in a city on the other side of the world. She put it on the table between them. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. And he said, not unkindly, not with cruelty, with the specific devastating gentleness of someone who genuinely believes what they are saying. "Naledi, this is not who you are." She looked at him across the table. She thought about her grandmother's kitchen. The rooibos on the stove. The 11-year-old girl waiting for a consequence that never came. The sentence she had been carrying for 27 years. Something settled in her chest. Quiet. Final. Like a door closing from the inside. "I think it is," she said. She began making calls the following morning. She chose Atlanta because she had a cousin there. Distant but warm. And because Atlanta had a particular history of building itself up from difficulty. Of refusing to stay down. Of making something from what was left after the hard thing happened. That felt like the right city for what she was about to do. She landed at Hartsfield-Jackson on a Thursday morning in September. 2 suitcases. A carry-on bag. Her grandmother's gold earrings in her ears. And a sentence she was finally old enough to understand completely. You will make mistakes that feel final. They are not final. You just have to keep choosing the next right thing until the right things outnumber the wrong ones. She came out of the arrivals gate and stood in the Atlanta morning and felt the specific feeling of a woman standing at the beginning of something. It was not comfortable. It was not supposed to be. But it was hers. All of it. Finally, completely, entirely hers. The thing about a crowd that believes in something is that it has a different quality from a crowd that is simply present. Most crowds are unified by proximity. By shared stimulation. By the fact of being in the same place at the same time. The energy is real but it is interchangeable. It could belong to any crowd. At any event. In any city. This crowd is different. You can feel it before the main speaker takes the podium. In the third row, a woman named Gloria is talking to the man beside her. She is 64. Retired school principal. 31 years in Sweet Auburn. She has never met this man before tonight. But within 4 minutes of sitting down they are already in the important conversation. She is telling him about the supermarket in Decatur. She has driven across town to that store twice in the past month. Because the produce section carries things she cannot find anywhere closer. Things that tell her someone thought about who was going to walk through those doors. Not a general someone. A specific someone who knew this community and built accordingly. The man beside her nods. He is mid-30s. A contractor. He did electrical work on one of Naledi's early renovations. He was paid fairly and on time. He remembers this because it was not always his experience. They have not introduced themselves yet. They are already having the conversation that matters. Toward the back, 3 young women in matching sweatshirts are negotiating cheerfully with the taller people in front of them for a better sightline to the stage. One of them has a phone raised, documenting. Another has a handmade button pinned to her jacket. Green and gold. Naledi. She made it herself last weekend because the campaign merchandise sold out online and she was not willing to show up without something. She would tell you this if you asked. She is not embarrassed about it at all. She touches the left earring. Once. Brief. The reflex of a woman carrying something she never sets down. Then she smiles. Not the campaign smile. The other one. The one that starts behind her eyes before it reaches her mouth. The smile of someone who has been through something and is genuinely glad to be standing on this side of it. The crowd responds the way crowds respond to things that are real. And Naledi Adams opens her mouth and begins. I want to start tonight by telling you something I don't usually lead with. Her voice carries the way voices carry when they are not being forced. Not pushed to fill a space too large for them. Not amplified beyond their natural register. The speakers on either side of the stage do their job cleanly. What comes through them is simply her voice. At its actual volume. Which is lower than most people expect the first time they hear her speak. And more powerful than the volume suggests it has any right to be. The ambient noise of 400 people softens. Not all at once. In the graduated way that attention moves through a crowd when it decides, collectively without discussion, that what is happening at the front of the room is worth the cost of silence. I made choices, she says, that I thought had defined me permanently. No warm-up. No opening joke. No recitation of names to acknowledge. Straight into it. Clarence sets his sweet tea down. I sat in a therapist's office in a city I barely knew. In a country that did not owe me anything. And I thought, this is it. This is the version of me I am stuck with. This is who I chose to become. Through the things I did. And the things I didn't do. And the things I let happen because I didn't yet understand that letting things happen is also a choice. She pauses. Not for effect. Because she is remembering something specific. And she is not going to pretend she isn't. Has anyone here ever felt that way? The silence answers before any hand goes up. Then the hands go up. Not a few. Many. Across the seated section and the standing section and the east edge of the lot where the food vendor has stopped moving containers and is listening. An older woman in the second row raises her hand with the full extension of someone who wants to make sure she is counted. The young woman with the handmade button raises hers. Then looks at her friends. All 3 of them have their hands up. Something moves across her face. Not surprise exactly. Not relief exactly. Somewhere between the two. Clarence does not raise his hand. His relationship with that question is too long and too specific to be communicated by a raised hand. But he nods. Once. Fully. The nod of a man confirming something he already knew. Naledi looks at the hands. I know that feeling, she says. I know it from the inside. I know what it feels like to sit with a choice you cannot undo and believe that the choice is now your identity. That you are the sum of your worst decisions. That whatever you were trying to build before that, before the mistake, before the fall, before the version of yourself you are not proud of, that it is gone now. That you used it up. He lets that land. That is a lie. Simple. Direct. No inflation. It is a very convincing lie. It has the weight of consequence behind it. So it sounds like wisdom. But it is a lie. And I know it is a lie because I believed it completely. For longer than I am comfortable telling you. And then I stopped believing it. And built everything you see from the other side of it. She makes a small gesture with her right hand. Not broad. Not theatrical. Just a quiet open motion that takes in the lot. The crowd. Auburn Avenue beyond. The invisible geography of businesses and relationships and community investment that her name is attached to across the city. Everything, she says simply. From the other side of that lie. The crowd has gone completely still. Not the stillness of people who have been quieted. The stillness of people who have been reached. The food vendor has fully stopped. The young woman with the phone has lowered it slightly. Not because she stopped documenting. Because something in her prioritized experiencing over recording. She did not make that decision consciously. It made itself. Gloria in the third row has her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes on the podium. The expression of a woman who taught school for 31 years and knows, with the precision of professional experience, When something true is being said versus when something performed is being aimed at a room. She made her assessment in the first 30 seconds. My grandmother told me something when I was 11 years old. Naledi's voice shifts slightly. Not softer exactly. More interior. The way a voice shifts when it is carrying a specific memory rather than a general argument. I was sitting in her kitchen in Soweto. A brief pause. In my grandmother's house, the kitchen was where everything important happened. Not the living room. Not the dining table on special occasions. The kitchen. Because my grandmother believed that important things should be said near food. That nourishment and truth belong in the same room. Someone in the crowd makes a sound of quiet recognition. Not laughter. Something warmer than laughter. I had done something wrong. I was 11. The wrongness felt enormous to me. The way wrongness does when you are young and your sense of proportion has not yet caught up with your conscience. I remember sitting at that kitchen table. Waiting for the consequence. The way time slows down when you are waiting to find out what your mistake is going to cost you. She pauses again. My grandmother did not give me the consequence. She lets that sit for a moment. She sat down across from me. She looked at me the way she looked at people when she was about to say something she had thought about carefully and meant completely. And she said, "The string lights hum above the crowd in the October air. 400 people wait." She said, "You will make mistakes that feel final. They are not final. You just have to keep choosing the next right thing until the right things outnumber the wrong ones." The crowd is completely still. Not the stillness of people who have been quieted by noise or instruction. The stillness of people who have just been handed something. Clarence picks up his sweet tea. Sets it back down without drinking from it. "I wrote it in my journal that night," Naledi says. "I was 11 years old. I wrote it down because even at 11 I understood that this was not the kind of sentence you trust yourself to remember. This was the kind you write down. And carry. I carried it for 27 years. Through school. Through a marriage I entered with everything I had and left with considerably less than I arrived with. Through a divorce that took 2 years and cost me things that were not only financial. Through a plane ride to a city that did not know my name. Through a therapist's office in Buckhead, Atlanta, Georgia, when I was 38 years old and starting over from nothing." She touches the left earring. The gesture is brief. Barely visible. Gloria sees it. The young woman with the phone sees it. He does not know why it moves her. But it does. I pulled that sentence out in that office. I read it. And I finally understood it. Not as comfort. Not as something kind that grandmothers say to make you feel better. As instruction. As the actual operational blueprint for what you do next when you believe there is no next. She leans forward slightly on the podium. The motion brings her fractionally closer to the crowd. The crowd feels it. You choose the next right thing. Not all the right things. Not a perfect record going forward. Not the erasure of everything behind you. Just the next right thing. And then the one after that. For as long as it takes. Which is longer than you want it to be. And shorter than you fear it might be. And one day you look up. And the right things outnumber the wrong ones. And you are whole. She straightens. Not clean. Whole. There is a difference. Clean means the record is clear. Whole means the person is complete. I'm not clean. I will never be clean. But I am whole. And I built everything you see from that wholeness. Her register shifts. Back outward. Toward the full crowd. Toward the political argument she came to make. But carrying now the weight of everything that came before it. The personal and the political not separated into different compartments the way politicians usually keep them. Woven together. The way they actually are in a real human life. This city has made mistakes, she says. This state has made mistakes. This country has made mistakes that feel permanent because we have been told they are permanent. Told by people who benefit from the permanence. Told by people who need us to believe that certain things cannot change. Because if we stop believing that, we will start changing them. But nothing that a human being built is permanent. Nothing. Every system we live inside was constructed by people who were making it up as they went. The same as we are. With the same mixture of good intentions and self-interest and fear and ambition that every human being brings to every decision they have ever made. They built it. Which means we can build something different. The crowd is with her now in the complete sense. Not just attentive. Activated. The particular current that moves through people when they have been reminded of their own agency. I am running for this office because I intend to build something different. Specifically, concretely, the Experiential Medicine Initiative. She says it cleanly, without inflation. The way you say something you have thought about for a long time and are no longer nervous about. In this city, in this state, in this country, we have a generation of retiring medical professionals carrying 40 years of lived clinical knowledge. Things they learn not from textbooks, but from doing the work. From being in the room when the textbook answer was not the right answer. From making the call that saved the life. And sometimes from missing the call that didn't. And learning from both in a way that no classroom can replicate. When those professionals retire, that knowledge retires with them. A young doctor graduates from one of the finest medical schools in this country and begins practicing with a strong theoretical foundation. And almost none of the experiential foundation that will eventually make them genuinely excellent. If their patients survive long enough for them to accumulate it. The crowd is quiet again. A different quality of quiet. Focused. Following the architecture of the argument. I want to build an institution. Not a hospital. Not a university. Something in between. Where a young physician sits across from a surgeon who has performed a procedure 3,000 times and learns not just the technique, but the judgment. The specific hard-won knowledge of what the textbook does not tell you. What only time and practice and failure and recovery can give you. Because that knowledge saves lives. Not in theory. Shli. In operating rooms and emergency wards and clinics in neighborhoods like this one. Where the gap between what medicine knows and what medicine delivers is widest. And the cost of that gap is highest. She pauses. When she speaks again her voice is quieter. I know this because my grandmother was failed by that gap. By the distance between what a young doctor knew from his training and what an experienced one would have recognized immediately. The knowledge existed. It was out there. It was in someone. It was just not in the room where she needed it. I am running to close that gap. Here. In this city. As a beginning. She is quiet for a moment. The lot is quiet with her. Then she says simply, my grandmother told me to keep choosing the next right thing. This campaign is my next right thing. What I am asking you tonight, is to make it yours too. The crowd responds. Not all at once. In the graduated, genuine way that real responses move through real crowds. Starting at the front. Moving back through the standing section. Reaching the east edge where Clarence is on his feet, which he had not planned to be, and which his knees register a formal complaint about. And the three young women in matching sweatshirts are holding each other without having discussed holding each other, and Gloria in the third row is applauding with the full deliberate effort of a woman who wants what she is feeling to be visible. The food vendor starts moving again. The young woman with the phone has it raised. Recording. But her free hand is pressed flat against her sternum. Over her heart. The unconscious gesture of someone who has been reached somewhere specific. The string lights hum above all of it. And at the side corridor between the scaffolding and the bread company's exterior wall, a large man in a dark jacket stands completely still with his back against the wall and his hands loose at his sides. He is not mapping exits. He is not assessing security positions. He is not doing any of the things he came to this lot to do. He is listening. And something in his face, in the specific quality of stillness that has settled over it while she has been speaking, is the face of someone hearing a thing they did not know they had been waiting to hear. He received the call on a Thursday morning in Chicago. He was at the window of his apartment on the near north side. Coffee in hand. Looking out at the street below. The phone rang. The contact was labeled G. He answered on the second ring. I have an assignment, May said. No greeting. They had not used greetings in 10 years. Where? Atlanta. Local political situation. A candidate who has become inconvenient. Orlando looked out at the street below. November was beginning its particular negotiation with Chicago. Not gradually. Not as a transition. As a renegotiation of terms. The people on the sidewalk had already adjusted. Heavier coats. Faster walking. The specific body language of a city that has accepted that warmth was a temporary arrangement and moved on. Timeline, he said. Primary window closes in 3 weeks. The client wants it resolved before the media cycle shifts in her favor. Her. Naledi Adams. 45. South African born. Running for state office in Atlanta. She has momentum. community support, and a policy proposal that is creating problems for certain interests that have retained our services. Orlando said nothing. He had been given versions of this information 7 times in 10 years. Different cities, different targets, different interests. He had learned early that the specific identities of those interests were not information he needed. He knew what he needed to know. The target, the location, the timeline, the approach parameters. Send me the brief, he said. Already sent. Study it before you land. The client is Senator Raymond Holt. You will not interact with him directly. All communication through me as usual. He wants it clean. He wants it before the primary. It is always before the primary, Orlando said. That is when it matters, Mace said. The call ended. He opened the encrypted file on his laptop. He read it the way he read all briefs. Fully. Once. Retaining what was operationally relevant. Setting aside what was not. Naledi Adams. 45. South African origin. American citizen. Atlanta resident for 7 years. Businesses. 1 fish market, 4 supermarket locations across the metro area. Campaign platform. Community development, healthcare access, something called the Experiential Medicine Initiative. Strong community approval ratings. Growing donor base. No significant personal security beyond standard campaign staff. He noted the initiative. Not because it was personally relevant. Nothing in a brief was personally relevant. Because it was the stated source of friction with the client's interests. Which meant it was the most important thing about her from an operational standpoint. You always understood the why. Even when the why was not your business. He booked a flight to Atlanta for Saturday. Then he closed the laptop and finished his coffee. Outside, Chicago had fully committed to November. He had been doing this for 10 years. It had not begun with a decision. It had begun with a circumstance. The kind that arrives when a person is at their lowest point and offers them something that looks like ground to stand on. He had been 20 years old. His mother had been dead for 6 weeks. And he had done something in the weeks following her death that he could not undo. What he had done for her. That was what he told himself. That was what he still told himself. Whether it was true was a question he had learned not to examine too directly. His mother's name was Carmela. She was 44 when she died. She had raised him alone in an apartment on the near west side of Chicago. 3 bedrooms. A kitchen that always smelled of the previous meal bleeding into the preparation of the next one. A window above the sink that faced the alley. A plant on that windowsill that received almost no light and survived anyway with the quiet stubbornness of things that have decided to live regardless of the conditions. She worked. She cooked. She showed up to every school event he ever had, including the ones he told her were not worth coming to, which was all of them because he was a teenage boy and teenage boys say things like that. She was afraid of their neighborhood at night. This was not irrational. The near west side in those years was the kind of neighborhood where a person's fear was proportional to their attention. He had attention. He had seen things. She had a son she was not willing to lose to the specific geography of where they lived. So they had an arrangement. Unstated but understood. He came home before dark. Most nights he did. The night she died he did not. He had been with his friends. Not doing anything that merited the word trouble. Just young men in a group, the way young men collect in groups, making nothing in particular last longer than it needed to. He had his phone off. He came home at 11:30. He was not there. He found out the rest from a neighbor who had been standing in the corridor outside their apartment door for 40 minutes, not knowing whether to call the police or wait or knock or simply go back inside and pretend she had not seen what she had seen. His mother had followed him. She had waited by the window as she always waited. And when 11 o'clock came and when she had done what she always did when her fear for him became larger than her ability to sit with it, she went looking for him. 3 blocks from their building she was robbed. He fought back. She was not a woman who did not fight back. The man who robbed her did not expect her to fight back. Orlando did not let himself finish that thought. Not now. Not in a hotel room in Atlanta on a Tuesday evening. He had a boundary with that thought and the boundary had held for 10 years and he was not going to let it break tonight. He looked at the ceiling. He breathed. He moved on. He had seen the man's face. Not during. He was not there during. But afterward, in the days that followed when the police were asking questions and the neighbors were talking and the near west side was doing what neighborhoods do after something terrible happens in them, which is absorb it and continue. Orlando had moved through the information available to him with the specific cold focus of someone who has decided what they are going to do and is simply collecting what they need to do it. He found the name. He found the face attached to the name. He waited 6 weeks. Not because he was uncertain. Because he was 20 years old and grief-hollowed and operating on pure instinct. And instinct told him that 6 weeks was the right distance between the thing that happened and what he was going to do about it. At 6 weeks he moved. He did not tell anyone. He did not ask for help. He went alone to the place where the man could be found, and he did what he went there to do, and he drove home afterward and sat in his car outside the apartment building for 3 hours. Waiting to feel something. The relief he had expected did not come. What came instead was nothing. A specific, total, architectural nothing that was worse than grief, because grief at least had the texture of something. The nothing had no texture. It simply was. He sat in the car for 3 hours. Then he went upstairs to the apartment that smelled like his mother's cooking and lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling until it was morning. The nothing did not leave. He would spend 10 years learning that it never would. The man who found him was named Victor Crane. He appeared at Orlando's door 11 days after the revenge killings. Mid-40s. Unremarkable face. The kind that hotel lobbies forgot immediately. He worked at that time as a political operative for a Chicago alderman named Dennis Fortis. He did not introduce himself as a recruiter. He said, "I know what you did. I know why you did it. And I know you did it cleanly enough that nobody who matters is looking at you for it. That is a specific kind of ability. I work with people who have specific abilities. I thought you might want to talk." Orlando let him in. Not because he trusted him. Because the apartment was empty and the nothing was still there, and Crane's presence was at least a different problem to put his attention on. They talked for 2 hours. Crane did not lie to him exactly. He framed things in the language available to a 20-year-old boy who had just spent 6 weeks in grief so complete it had rearranged something structural inside him. He said, "There are people who create problems for other people, and there are people who resolve those problems, and the resolvers are necessary and well compensated and operate with a level of protection that someone in your situation would find useful." He said, "What you did to those men was not wrong in any moral sense that actually matters. The law has its definitions. The moral reality is different. The men you removed were not men whose absence makes the world worse." He said, "You have demonstrated an ability to make a decision and execute it under conditions of extreme emotional pressure without leaving a trail. That is rare. That is valuable." He did not say, "You will spend the next 10 years removing people who are inconvenient to politicians and their financial networks." He did not say, "The grief you are feeling will not go away through this work. It will simply be buried under the weight of the work until you can no longer locate it." He did not say these things. And Orlando at 20 had not known to ask for them. He said yes. Because the alternative was the apartment. And the nothing. And the ceiling that gave nothing back. He had been good at it from the beginning. Not good the way people are good at things they love. Good the way certain people are good at things they are constitutionally suited for, regardless of whether those things are good for them. He was organized. Patient. He understood space and timing and the specific vulnerability of public events better than people who had been doing this work twice as long as he had. He did not take risks he had not calculated. He did not make decisions from emotion. Or rather, he had sealed the part of himself that generated emotion tightly enough that it did not interfere with his decisions. He had completed 7 assignments in 10 years. Detroit, Washington, D.C., Miami, Houston, New York. Twice. He had never been identified. Never investigated. Never seriously threatened by any law enforcement inquiry. He worked for Mace exclusively. Mace was the interface between Orlando and the broader network. He knew his handler. His handler knew the network. He did not know the network. This was standard. This was how it worked. He had not questioned the arrangement. Questioning the arrangement was not part of the work. The flight from O'Hare to Hartsfield-Jackson was 2 hours and 14 minutes. He sat in the window seat. Always the window seat. The wall on one side. The aisle sightline on the other. He read the brief a second time. Then he closed the laptop and looked out at the cloud cover over Tennessee. He thought about the approach parameters. The rally on Tuesday in Sweet Auburn. The event schedule. The security configuration. The gaps in her perimeter. He would go to the rally. Assess the space. Confirm the security. Identify the window. Clean. Before the primary. Standard. He looked out the window at the clouds. Somewhere in the section on her campaign platform, there had been a paragraph about the experiential medicine initiative. He had read it with operational attention and set it aside. But it had not fully set aside. His mother had seen 3 doctors over 2 years. The pain in her side, real, specific, persistent, had been categorized by all 3 as stress-related. Age-related. The particular medical shorthand for we do not see what you are describing, and so we are filing it in the category of things women of your age describe when they are anxious. She was 44. She was not anxious. The pain was real. The 4th doctor, 68, semi-retired, brought in as a second opinion by a neighbor who knew someone, had known what it was in 8 minutes. Because he had seen it before. 6 times in 30 years. His training had not taught him to recognize it. 30 years of doing the work had. He retired 6 months later. Orlando's mother had not died from that condition. She had died differently. Earlier. In circumstances that had nothing to do with medicine. But the 4th doctor had stayed with him. The image of a man who carried knowledge that was not in any book. Who had earned that knowledge through decades of doing the work. Who had taken it with him when he left. The initiative was not his business. The target was his business. He put his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. The plane began its descent into Atlanta. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in the part he had learned to keep very quiet, something that had no professional category shifted slightly. Like a door. Not yet open. Just no longer entirely closed. He arrived in Sweet Auburn at 5:58 p.m. 89 minutes before Naledi Adams would walk to the podium. He parked 2 blocks east of the lot. Not the closest available parking. The parking that offered the best combination of exit options and the least foot traffic past the vehicle. He sat in the car for 4 minutes with the engine off. Running through the checklist. Not a written checklist. An internal one. Compiled over 10 years until it operated below the level of conscious thought. The way experienced drivers check mirrors without deciding to check mirrors. Exits, 3 primary, 2 secondary. Confirmed from the satellite view he had studied that morning. Crowd density projection, 300 to 450. Based on the campaign's public event listings and her previous rally attendance figures. Security configuration, campaign staff visible security, likely 2 to 3, possibly plainclothes in the crowd. Perimeter, open lot, multiple access points, east side historically lightest in coverage based on the layout of the space. He got out of the car. He was wearing dark jeans and a black long-sleeve shirt under the dark-fitted jacket. The combination he had learned over 10 years, occupied the useful middle ground between invisible and unremarkable. Not so formal that he registered as out of place at a community event. Not so casual that he looked unconsidered. He looked like someone passing through. Which was a description that fit enough people at enough events that it generated no specific attention. The tattoos were the only variable. At his neck, just above the collar, the edge of a larger piece was visible. Dark geometric lines that continued across his chest and shoulder. Accumulated over years. Not designed as a set. The marks of a man who had been marking time. On the backs of both hands and up both forearms. Older designs. The kind that record rather than declare. He had learned early that tattoos registered differently in different environments. In some rooms they required management. In a community event in Sweet Auburn on a Tuesday evening they were unremarkable. The size of the man wearing them was the more significant variable. He walked toward the lot. The lot was in the process of becoming what it would be at full capacity. The particular transitional state of an event space that has been set up and is now filling. Infrastructure visible. Atmosphere still forming. String lights between the lampposts and scaffolding. Folding chairs maybe 60% occupied. The warm-up preparation audible from the stage. Someone adjusting a speaker stand, someone testing the microphone. He walked the perimeter first. Not quickly. Not slowly. At the pace of someone moving through a space without particular urgency. North side. The bread company's exterior wall. Thought. No windows at ground level. One service door locked from the outside. Not a useful entry or exit point. But a useful landmark for spatial orientation. South side. Open to Auburn Avenue. Primary public entrance. 2 campaign volunteers at a folding table checking people in. Not security. Event volunteers. Young. Focused on the clipboard rather than the crowd flowing through. The gap between the volunteer table and the eastern edge of the entrance was approximately 8 feet. Monitored. East side. The gap he had identified from satellite view. The northeast corner where the scaffolding ended and the neighboring building's wall began. A 6-foot passage. Unstaffed. Unclosed. A food vendor had set up near this edge. Unofficially, his presence generating a small cluster of people that provided useful cover for the corner's lack of official attention. West side. The stage scaffolding. The press area to the right of the stage. And the side corridor between the scaffolding and the bread company's exterior wall. Approximately 4 feet wide. Running the full length of the stage setup. This was the position. Sightline to the full stage. The primary crowd. Both east side exits. The street beyond. He completed the perimeter walk and moved to the corridor. He positioned himself with his back against the bread company's exterior wall. From here he could confirm target position when she took the stage. He could read the full sweep of the crowd from left to right. Both visible security staff were identifiable from this position. One at the front left corner of the folding chair section. One at the press area to the right of the stage. He located the likely plainclothes in 20 seconds. A man in the standing section. Mid-40s. Moving through the crowd with the pattern of someone not moving toward anything specific. Which meant he was moving through everything generally. One plainclothes confirmed. Possibly a second in the seated section. A woman near the third row whose body language had the same quality of general attention. He was not certain enough to count her. Security configuration. Lighter than a candidate with her profile might warrant. Either budget constraints or a deliberate choice to keep events feeling accessible rather than protected. The second option was consistent with the campaign's community-first positioning. Either way, the northeast corner gap was real. The east entrance gap was real. And the side corridor he currently occupied had been empty for the entirety of his perimeter walk. He noted all of this. He had what he needed. He was 4 minutes into his position when the crowd reached density. He watched it fill. Not because it was operationally necessary. He had the reconnaissance he needed. But maintaining his position was less conspicuous than leaving and returning. So he stayed. And watched. He had watched crowds for 10 years. He understood their mechanics. The way they organized around sightlines and social proximity. The way subgroups formed and held and dissolved. The way energy changed as a crowd reached density. He read this crowd the way he read all crowds. And then he noticed something. This crowd was not performing attendance. He had been to enough political events to know what performance looked like. The particular quality of people who came because it was expected. Or because it served their social positioning. Or because they wanted to be seen without being particularly invested in the content. Performance had a signature. Distributed attention. People dividing themselves between the stage and their phones and their neighbors. The ambient noise of a crowd that is present but not committed. This crowd was committed. Not all 400 of them. Crowds were never monolithic. But a significant proportion. The older woman in the third row whose posture had the specific quality of someone who arrived prepared to pay full attention. The elderly man in the lawn chair who had set up early and chosen his position carefully. The young women toward the back who kept orienting toward the empty stage with the anticipatory body language of people who knew what they were about to hear. These were not people who had been assembled. They had chosen to be here. He filed this. It was not operationally relevant. He filed it anyway. Brandon finished his remarks. The applause was genuine. The crowd settled into the configuration of 400 people who have transitioned from arriving to waiting. Orlando checked his watch. 6:44. He looked at the podium. He looked at the northeast corner gap. Still unmonitored. The food vendor's cluster of customers had tightened the crowd density in that area in a way worth noting for approach planning. He looked at the 2 visible security staff. Both in position. No change. He looked at the side corridor behind him. Still empty. 41 minutes in this position and no one had come through. For all practical purposes he was invisible. The reconnaissance was going precisely as it should. He was calculating the east side approach timing when the movement at the left side of the stage registered in his peripheral vision. He looked toward it automatically. Confirm target position. Standard. Naledi Adams walked to the podium. He looked at her the way he looked at targets during reconnaissance, registering physical details, position, movement pattern, the specifics that the brief's photograph had not fully captured. The brief's photograph had been taken at a distance. It had given him her general appearance. Standing at the podium, she was something more specific than a photograph. The particular way she carried herself. The absence of the performance of authority that most people in her position could not suppress. The quality of stillness before she began speaking that was not hesitation. It was preparation. She looked out at the crowd. For a fraction of a second, in the general sweep of her gaze across the full lot, her eyes passed across the side corridor. He was in shadow. She would not have been able to see him clearly. He was certain of this. He had chosen this position partly for its low visibility from the stage. But for that fraction of a second her gaze did not sweep past the corridor. It paused there. Then moved on. He filed this. She began to speak. He returned to calculating the approach timing. The crowd density in the northeast corner. The gap between his current timeline and the 3-day deadline Mace had established. He ran through the variables with the systematic efficiency of 10 years. He was 3 variables in when her voice reached him. I made choices that I thought had defined me permanently. The calculations stopped. Not a decision. Not a deliberate lowering of his professional guard. The calculation simply stopped. The way a clock stops. Between 1 second and the next. Without warning. In the middle of its function. He stood in the side corridor with his back against the wall. And he listened. Her voice had a quality he was not prepared for. He had heard hundreds of speeches. He had stood at the outer edges of political events in 7 cities and listened to men and women construct sentences designed to produce specific emotional responses in crowds. He understood the mechanics of that construction. He knew what performance sounded like. He knew the particular quality of the slight lag between a speaker's thought and their expression. The half-second that revealed the calculation underneath the delivery. There was no lag in her voice. She was not delivering a message. She was reporting from a location. Speaking from the inside of something she had actually lived. And the difference between that and what he normally heard at these events was the difference between a recording of rain and actual rain. He stood in the side corridor and he did not map exits. He listened.